If it happens slowly and organically, it's easier to deal with. When it happens in a spurt, and I think that's what happened in the case of the major northeastern cities, where in the new chapter of busing, a lot of migrants showed up. It was unexpected and unplanned for.
Well, what warning does Texas get when 300,000 people cross over every month? I think it's a bit rich for the mayors of cities up north to say, well, hang on a minute, can you guys just slow things down, give us some more warning, let us sort it out? I think that's a ploy. I think they should be talking to the White House because the White House has control over the flow. Texas doesn't have any control whatsoever.
As pressure continues, cities like Chicago and New York have begun putting more restrictions on migrant drop-offs to stem the flow. In January 2024, Mayor Adams also announced a lawsuit against charter companies hired by Texas to transport migrants into the city. But what cities say they need the most right now is federal assistance.
I think the federal government was late coming to this. We should have developed a mechanism for reimbursing impacted states and cities early on. Unless we get the reimbursement scheme under control, I think cities will suffer for a long time.
Even sanctuary cities that said, come one, come all, are now begging the Biden administration to unloose the coffers and get them more federal money, which is why it's become such a big issue in Washington, because you're asking essentially a Congress that passed laws that explicitly ban what the president is doing in terms of catching and releasing people at the border and his parole programs. You're asking that same Congress that's watching the laws that it wrote be flouted to pony up $20 billion or more to go to grants for people crossing the border, to provide services in many cases that are not provided to American citizens. So it's become politically contentious.
The Biden administration told CNBC that they were unable to accommodate an interview with CNBC. But the Department of Homeland Security said that it is coordinating with cities and states across the country to identify ways it can continue to maximize its support for local communities, while enforcing the law and returning or removing those without a legal basis to remain in the country.
Even though the United States is, $34 trillion in the hole and growing at over $1 trillion a year of deficit, we do at least print money and we can make more of it. Cities and states, on the other hand, are not so blessed. Lots of cities like Chicago, New York are getting into some pretty serious debt. What tends to happen is there's a snowball effect. The city will turn to the state and ask for a bailout, and then the state will turn to the federal government and ask for a bailout. So the solvency of our big cities and our states is definitely in question.
For some experts, containing the flow of immigration is vital in solving the current crisis.
The busing from Texas is a tiny, tiny fraction of the number of people who are going to cities in the rest of the country.
We have to certainly limit the number of asylum seekers who come to the border.
For others, it's about fixing the immigration system that's long been broken.
Unless we have a more orderly system with incentives for people to come here and regular, actually accessible pathways in the region, we will continue to see irregular migration, and we will continue to see people without the durable status that they need to more quickly be able to sustain themselves and also contribute to our economy and our economic growth.
However, the continued politicization of immigration will only make the issue more difficult to address.
The more we politicize and weaponize this issue, the less likely it is that we will solve it.
I'm an immigrant myself. I came here when I was 6. This country was built by immigration, but it was also built by laws. And ultimately, the number of people that come into this country and the terms under which they come is a decision that's made by our elected officials. If we allow a veto to the entire world to just bypass our laws and do whatever they want, then we've lost our sovereignty, our national sovereignty, and we've lost the rule of law. So I regret that the argument isn't a debate between left and right about what immigration levels are in the interests of the United States as a whole, and we come up with a compromise where no one's happy. Instead, we just stay in our corners and sling mud at each other, and meanwhile, the border's wide open and no one's happy.